Today on the podcast, The Brett Allen Show. Thanks. Well, first, everybody, for watching and listening and supporting the show. I have a very special guest. I'm excited. Comedian Bill Dawes, very diversified in all that he does. I don't know exactly what we can talk about as far as everything is going. It seems like we're coming to an end. We'll focus on your comedy career. But thanks for your time, man. It's a pleasure to meet you. I
I
appreciate
thought you
it.
said we're coming to an end. I thought you were talking about my career, and I was like, okay, valid point.
No, no, I don't think that's the case. I meant the other. Well, the writers are almost done. Hopefully, the actors are close behind.
I mean, if the
Um,
actors don't follow suit this week or next, then I'm going to go kill the nanny, because the only reason actors even started it was because of the writers.
right.
The writers kind of dragged us in, so
Yeah. Yeah.
it, it's like a bait and switch. You can't like get us all ramped up to be on your side and then make an agreement and not make sure that we have our agreement. So I think it's probably the last I heard was the producers went to SAG and said, "This is our final offer." I think they did to both SAG and WGA, and WGA is
Okay.
taking it, but we haven't heard from SAG yet. So maybe they're holding on a little bit longer. I don't know.
Well, it's funny. I'm glad we're talking about this. This is very cool to have your perspective because I've talked to other actors prior to this happening. At least the SAG after part.
No.
Um, and they had a lot to say, but now that we're in the midst of it, I mean, we had George Clooney of all people give his 2 cents on it. I don't know if you saw that, but he said something
No,
interesting. He goes, I know you're not interested in hearing about me talking about suffering because that's would fall on deaf ears, but I will tell you there's 164,000 other actors out there who are not in my position. I've had a very good career. Basically saying, hey, let's bring this to an end because there's a lot of people that are suffering. And everybody's like, please keep this man safe at all costs because he's championing basically for everybody else who would be considered blue collar, who work hard like you have in your past career, things that you've done. So I hope we're close. But it brings me to a very interesting point that I do want to talk about with you because you are very diversified in what you do. Obviously, the comedy part of it, the stand up, which you were on a friend of mine's podcast, Hot Breath with Joel Byers. That was a
oh yeah,
great interview. Yeah, I've known Joel forever and we've helped each other out in the past, but you are very diversified in what you do. As a content creator, an artist, creative, is it important to be able to diversify, especially when we're in times like this where there aren't certain things that you can do, but you can still travel and do stand up?
yeah. No, it's a good question. I had a friend of mine, a really uh, great actress named Kim Director, and she's done. I mean, just in terms of her pedigree, her resume is way more impressive than mine. I mean, she's been in, I think, 7 Spike Lee
Oh,
films, and
wow.
she's had regular roles on like 4 or 5 TV shows as a series regular. And she, I don't want, I hope this isn't divulging, but she's had, parts of her life where she's had to struggle and find kind of different ways to make money,
Yeah.
support her lifestyle, and just like makeup and auditions and all the things that a female actress would need to use to kind of keep their career going. And she said to me just probably like a few months ago, she goes, "You're so lucky that you got into stand-up comedy, because I think now Kim has to go like teach Pilates or something, because she had literally no other source of revenue." Um, and it's funny because I'm looking at it going like, wait, I didn't get into comedy because I needed an additional source of income. I
Yeah.
got into comedy because I was doing New York theater and I was so sick of these. Am I allowed to curse in your
You're good.
podcast?
Yeah. You're totally fine. Yeah. You're
I'm
okay.
so I'm so used to like so many directors and particularly new playwrights in New York. And there's some brilliant ones I worked with. David Lindsay Bear. There's some that are amazing, but a lot of them are also fucking idiots.
Yeah.
And they think because they wrote a play that it's the Torah, and that they divinely shat their words from the asshole of Krishna, and you have to like, oh, thank you so much for giving it to us lowly actors. It's sort of like the David Mamet philosophy about, and obviously you can't. I'm not going to crap on David Mamet as a playwright. He's obviously a brilliant playwright, but watch David Mamet direct a movie or a play, and you're like, there's not a human being in this fucking production,
Right.
because he wants it so much about the language that as an actor, you kind of can't, he thinks any emoting or adding any zhuzh to it destroys the integrity of his language. And you're kind of like, well, you're not Shakespeare, calm down. But he, and I just, he wrote a book called True and False when I was coming to school, which is a very popular acting book, which is basically just about like, say the words as honest as you can with the, that the playwright wrote, and don't try to do substitution as if Meisner. He's like, it's all bullshit. Just say the words and mean it. And in a way, he's right, but in a way, also like, go eat a dick, David Mamet. You know what I mean? Because the truth is, the best stuff that you'll ever see on film is not the words written by the writer. True, it is not. That's never the best shit on film. The best shit on film are the mistakes, the happy accidents, the improvs. Always. I mean, you look back. I mean, The Godfather is a perfect example. How many great moments in The Godfather were completely not supposed to be really in the script?
Right.
Whether it's Sonny, being a hell of a guy with a trash can and they let it roll or the other actor not realizing that there was an actual horse head in his bed and discovering it. There's just a lot of these moments that kind of, I think, in my opinion, I was getting to the point, to get to the comedy thing, I was getting to the point where I was getting really sick of being told, like, you're just an actor. Just say the lines. Just say the, yeah. And I was kind of like, well, but I think this word would be, if we use a different word here, it'd be better. Cute, Bill. But this play won awards in the West End. It kind of all started when I did this play called Burning Blue, which was a off-Broadway play. I had a great role in it. It was a dream role. I don't want to get into the details of it, but it wasn't a great play. I guess it had some, it got some attention on the West End in London because like people are showing their dicks in it, which is like, ooh, and like New York theater, if you show a dick, like, ooh, you're moving to Broadway. You can have like very mediocre plays like Take Me Out, or but a bunch of hot guys with their dicks out. So I was in a hot guys with their dicks out play, and it was an average play. When it got to New York, this is after September 11th, of course, got to New York, and no one really gave a shit about gays in the military as a theme the year after September 11th. So it was one of my first big roles off Broadway. Anyway, he kept like henpecking me about lines and choices and words. If I changed one word, he'd get on me. And it just started really getting to me because I was like, I go, I'm trying to help your play. I'm trying to fix your play and make it better, because a couple of these lines aren't as funny as they would be. He gave me permission to change one line one time, and it killed because it's a comedy line. And then he told me to change it back for no other reason than his ego. And it just started getting to me that I was like, wait, if I think I know what's funny and what comedy is, and I think I know how to do some writing, then what are my options? And so I had some friends who were doing stand-up comedy, and they said, why don't you come do it? And I was like, to me, stand-up comedy, I guess at the time, Dane Cook was really big, because this is like, it wasn't really till 2005 where I started.
Okay.
And so Dane Cook, I think a lot of people, they don't admit it now, but I think a lot of people got into comedy because of Dane Cook. I mean, honestly, a lot of guys, because before Dane Cook, comedy was like, you're either like the dude with the leather jacket smoking, who was just so crazy, or you were the guy with the blazer and the jeans. You were either like Dice or Seinfeld. There was no like, there was no just, yeah, there was no dude. So then Dane shows up with his backwards baseball cap and Bruins jersey, and you're like, oh, this is a comic. This isn't what we see in comedy. You'd seen that in the acting world. There'd been people who played that role, like the Adam Sandler roles, in the 90s and stuff, but you hadn't really seen that in just stand up. So so I think it kind of like really I think it galvanized a lot of like people who thought they were funny, or maybe were former jocks, or just kind of dudes, or even frat guys, to go like, oh, maybe I can actually do this. I don't have to be like either Andrew Dice Clay or Seinfeld. I don't have to be a nerd. I don't have to be a tough guy. I could just be like a dude. It's funny because Dane isn't really a dude, but he was able to like sort of do enough cultural appropriation to be that guy. And like, I think he was brilliant. I think when he started off, he was a brilliant comic. He still is a really brilliant comic, in my opinion. But so at the time, I was being told that my opinions didn't matter, my thoughts didn't matter, my improv didn't matter. And I was watching a comic come up, get enormous, who from optics at the time was like me, just like a regular guy who didn't do all that much observational clean comedy. It was physical comedy. It was goofy. It was just silly thoughts sometimes. So I think that's kind of what was like, okay, what if maybe I could do stand up if I can get into it through like a physical lens or perspective. And that's, so when I started, everything I was doing was kind of somewhat physical comedy based. And I think if it wasn't for Dane, I don't think I ever would have tried that. But so my interest in comedy was mostly about uh, being told how dumb I am as an actor. And
That's
and
crazy
in
to hear
my,
you say that. Yeah.
I mean, but it's not like me specifically, but just like in general, actors being treated like they're fucking dumb. And it's gone through my whole career. The last play I did, I played Rudolf Nureyev, who was a gay Russian ballet dancer, and the play it was 3 hours. It was a fucking mess, man. It was a two-person play that was literally like 2.5 hours or something. I was like, bring on the dancing elephants. This is horseshit. So I kept pushing for cuts, and the director of the action, okay, let's cut this cut. The playwright from Chicago, some fucking nerd, he flies in to see what's going on. And we went over cuts, and he kind of allowed and agreed most of them. But then at one point he said, actually sometimes I do listen to actors. Like I've gotten in trouble for listening to actors before. And I said, interesting. I said, who listens to actors a lot and works with actors a lot and lets them kind of come up with ideas and create things and pitch in all the time? Tom McHale and Lin-Manuel Miranda, who just have Hamilton on Broadway right now. That is a collaborative process. So the fact that as genius as Lynn is and genius as Tommy is, like they also had a lot of brilliant actors with a lot of egos, but Lynn and Tommy are smart enough and brilliant enough to negotiate all those people and collaborate and to make the best musical of all time. And here's this guy doing like a shitty off Broadway play that he's like, I guess I could listen to. So the good thing about comedy is that it gave me another outlet. The bad thing is got me a little bit spoiled in terms of like my opinion about what is funny. What I do think.
I love it. I think that's so smart because I find what comedians do. It's interesting. Like you take a Joel McHale who's been part of both worlds. And when he does
Yeah.
a live show, the audience is split, whether they're coming to see him from Parks and Rec or not Parks and Rec, Community, or just because he's funny and he's a comedian. So that would lead me to my next question, because you've done theater, Broadway, off Broadway, all of this, and now comedy. What is your audience when people come see you? Is it mostly familiar with your stand-up, or do they know you from other things that you've done, maybe television or Broadway or off Broadway or whatever the case might be?
I haven't really, I think mostly people become because of comedy.
Okay.
I think that, yeah, I'm trying to think, like, I think most people come to see comics for the comedy usually. And then you have maybe like 10-20% that come for, like, you could have a comic who's a crowd work comic and they come to see the crowd work, and then they see a comic doing a set and they're like, wait, I thought it was just going to be crowd work. So that does happen. But unless you're really famous, like I write and tour with Jeremy Piven, and Piven was obviously so famous that people come to see him
because of Ari Gold.
Ari Gold, basically, not even for the other things, but mostly Ari Gold. Now, for him to get to the point where it switches over and people come to see him mostly for stand-up, I think it would be a few years down the road, and you'd have to really make a splash in the stand-up world. So, like right now, I don't have anything I've done acting-wise that's iconic. I mean, I keep hoping for it, but every role I do that kind of like, oh, this is gonna be a big one. It's kind of like, so there are definitely people who come who've seen me in different things. But also, let's say, for example, someone saw me in Alaska Daily and they really liked Alaska Daily and they're a huge fan of Alaska Daily, which probably means they're like a middle-aged housewife from the Midwest.
I enjoyed it. I had several of your castmates on from the show. Oh yeah. I had probably 3 or 4 ancillary supporting actors come on. Yeah, it was a
Huh.
great show. I loved
And
it.
they're great, and and it was a great experience. But the point is, I don't think that person that's going to. I don't think that's going to translate into a
Okay.
ticket sale for a comedy club. The
That's
type of person
funny. Yeah. They bill you as comedian Bill Dawes as seen in Alaska Daily. Like it's
isn't
probably
that
not.
wild?
um Interesting. That's cool that you write and tour with Jeremy. I mean, obviously I knew him from Entourage clearly, and I knew that he did comedy, but I didn't realize it was such a big part of his life. I saw him, I think it was in San Francisco at Cobb's. I saw you in San Francisco for sure. It's interesting. Like, I think that's where it was. What you do is so interesting, and that you're able to split the two worlds and have success. What I feel is success in both worlds. I wanted to ask you, I do consider you to be successful, obviously, because of the platform you have. What do you feel has been key in your success outside of the talent and just being available to do it? Is there any one particular thing? Being kind to people is big. Like what is important to you to help you continue to grow?
Well, it's funny you said because in my head I'm like, am I successful? I go back, I waver. There are patches where I feel successful and patches where I'm like, what am I doing? I should have been an engineer. Um, I think I don't on one level I'm not the person to ask because I don't have this like massive, but I think that what I see with other people and even for myself what pays off is one. I mean, obviously you can't ever underestimate work ethic,
Right.
and I think one of the things that I kind of had to come to terms with when I was growing up was I was pretty naturally good at a lot of things. I was pretty athletic in a lot of things. Um, so I wasn't like a bro, but I was a pretty good natural athlete. And so because I was a natural athlete, I would watch movies like The Natural or watch movies about these people who were like great athletes, like Babe Ruth, who like just got drunk and fucked women, didn't give a shit. And I always thought that was cool to be a natural who didn't who didn't put in the work. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah,
had
no,
like
I
a
get
certain
it.
bizarre pride about like and so what it meant was like I was a good soccer player, like I was like, all district and all region, all that shit, but I wasn't a great soccer player. You know what I mean? It means that I was like I'm a good jujitsu guy. I'm not a great jujitsu guy. It means that like I'm a good comic, and sometimes I'm like, wow, I could be a better comic if I really because particularly when I first started comedy, people were like, do you write? I was like, I don't write, man. I just like get some ideas and I go up there. And I was so proud of myself. But the truth is, like, the people that I really, really admire are the comics that write every day. So I've had to kind of change my perspective, and you realize that the best people of all time are the people who have whatever talent. Like I guess here's how I'd look at it. You have the people, you have the level of talent, right? Like here's here's the level of talent, here's the level of talent, right? That if you're at this level of talent, you can work super hard and be here, right? And be way above this person, come off better than this person, get bigger laughs this person who's just resting on their natural talent. But this person works hard, then they're going to be up
Mm.
there. So that's why the people, all the stories about Michael Jordan and Lionel Messi and all, the stories about all the true goats, they all work like fucking maniacs. Patton Oswalt's writing all the time, working all the time, doing hours in fucking Silver Lake. So the true goats, if you want to be a goat, and obviously like I have no aspiration to be a goat, but you always want to be the best you can be. And so strive to be the goat for yourself. So I've had to kind of come to terms with the fact that like I have to that my discipline is always in question. I always have to improve, and I always have to recognize the fact that hard work will pay off more than talent.
Very
You know,
true. I think if I went back and listened to the episodes that I've done and great people I've interviewed, obviously present company included yourself, I think that is like a theme, a golden thread to all the conversations, that hard work always wins the day, because you just have to do it. Like if you don't, you won't get to the level that you want to get to, or maybe perhaps even grow, because like you could just sit there and coast on your success. Like when I pitched people to come on the show, there was a point where I was like, I've had this person and that person, and that's going to get me in the door with somebody else. And that's far from true. It's like, who cares? We don't really care. We just want to
Yeah.
know how hard you're working and are you getting better at what you do? You said something interesting about Dane Cook, and I want to ask you about this and crowd work comics that you see. This TikTok now is huge, clips of comics doing crowd work, and then their list of cities come up that they're coming to. Not that that's
Yeah.
bad, but I want to ask you, I mean, obviously for Dane, social media was not really a thing, but he mastered MySpace. Now it seems like the days have gone by where comics do morning radio. They still do it, but now it's posting on social media. Hey, I'm going to
Sure.
be in your town. Come
Yeah.
see me. How important is social media to what you do now? I mean, it's obviously clearly important. Let me rephrase the question. Is social media, does that play an equal part in success of filling out a club now versus just you getting booked? If that question
Mhm.
makes sense, it's kind of
Yeah, it
multi-layered,
does.
but
I
I'm
mean,
interested to know.
yeah, I also think the it kind of ties into what we were saying, because the people who are really posting with the social media and doing this stuff and curating, creating, and working with people, it ties into the work ethic too, right? The
Okay.
people, and I will say this specifically because the comic that everyone's talking about in terms of this is Matt Rife. And Matt Rife was
Yeah.
my feature for several years before he blew up. He was my feature, and he's one of the people who featured for me. And he's a very diligent guy. You know what I mean? He's always been a pretty. I mean, he parties and whatever, and he can't have enough baseball bats to knock the women away. But at the same time, like he works hard and he really cares about the craft. Uh, so it's not that he was just a guy who got lucky on some crowd work because of social media. It's not like Dane Cook got lucky because of MySpace. Dane Cook,
They
when
leveraged
I
it
would
well. Yeah.
they leveraged well, but I would also say this, which people would know or don't know unless they. Sometimes it's hard to know because people's reactions at comedy clubs can be based on their fame level too, but that's not necessarily the case because yeah, I just had a show and Kevin Hart was on it 2 days ago, and Kevin Hart's obviously you can't really get bigger than Kevin Hart. And Kevin Hart was just working out new shit, and the audience was there, but he didn't do nearly as well as some of the other comics who are working on their A material that they'd honed for years. But Kevin's such a pro, and he's so natural. He was able to go up there and just tell a story that he had with his family in Africa that he probably only said out loud a couple of times. You know what I mean? And he still had the audience engaged and the audience laughing, but it wasn't crazy. It was just like, okay, people. He's affable. He's got natural talent. If I tried to do a story out of the gate, it just I would eat a dick. But I guess my point is what people don't realize about Dane or even remember about Dane. When Dane was doing live shows in 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, he would. I mean, he would blow the fucking roof off the place.
Yeah.
I mean, and he was up. It'd be a murderer's row with like Joy Joe Coy, Ralphie May, Alonzo Bodden, Mitch Mulaney, um, Bobby Lee, all these fucking monsters on these shows. And Dan Cook would blow the fucking roof. I mean, in a way that is, and I don't mean when he got off stage or got on stage, like in the middle of his set. It was kind of he could do something pretty magical that very, very, very few people I've ever seen be able to do, which is to create this like roll of laughter that would last through his entire 25-minute set or whatever. Um, so and Matt Rife, whatever people want to say about him, because of course they're haters and stuff. He is good at crowd work. He did Wild and Out. He honed his skill to like smack down people. That's what he does with his friends. It's kind of his natural thing that he likes to go to as a person. So he's good at it. So it's not just like you do social media and you push social media and you become famous and you get the tours. You have to be really good at it too. And I see it mostly a positive thing because I see what gets borne out is people who are like someone like Sammy Obeid. I don't know if you know Sammy Obeid. Sammy
Oh
Obeid,
yeah.
Sammy Obeid. I mean, I think he's one of the best writers in comedy. I think he's untouchable. I think he's up there with Patton and some of the goats. And he's not the most. He doesn't look like Matt Rife. He's not dynamic like Dane on stage necessarily. But he's a brilliant writer, and has really great reversals and great wordplay, and there's a lot of arithmetic to his joke, and a lot of just interesting like calculus to the way that he formulates his bits. And he's now, just by consistently posting and exposing his comedy to people, he is now doing a world tour, and he has way more followers than I'd have. And so I do think that the social media, although you can get people who I guess get huge with very little talent, who don't have great acts, but in general, I feel like it's almost an example of the cream rising to the top. So I don't have a problem with it. I mean, the flip side is you could say people who get huge from doing Vine videos, or let's look at something like King Batch, right? King Batch got huge from Vine, became a big actor, has 25 million views. And he, when he started doing comedy, same with Trevor Wallace, everyone want to hate him. Oh, he's not that good. Like, he's been doing it for 5 months. Asshole, relax. And now Trevor Wallace and King Batch are untouchable. I mean, they're great. They're great comics. They command a crowd. They if you're given the opportunity for whatever reason, fame or movies or podcast, and then you're able to capitalize on it, great. So I think social media is, if anything, it's kind of like when you go sunning at the beach, you put on an accelerator. It's an accelerator.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the sun, but it's going to accelerate the sun, So I don't have a problem with it,
I love it. I think it's all very fascinating. One last question here. Looking at your career and all the things that you've done, really, has there ever been somebody that you have come across, whether it's in the theater or comedy world, somebody that you admire that has just spoken into your life and given you advice that really has helped you go, hey, this is great?
Yeah. I mean, ironically, there's not a lot of people in comedy.
It's very competitive.
Yeah. For some reason in comedy, there's not a lot of people. No one's really taken me under their wing in comedy for better, other than Jamie Masada, the owner of the Laugh Factory. So I will give it to him. Jamie Masada, and sometimes he's like the baseball coach in high school who's like, hey, get over here, you piece of shit. What are you doing? So he's given me some tough love. There are times where I couldn't go on stage unless I sat on a chair for my whole set. Or I used to do a Russian character named, I'm Georgi, I'm from Moldova. He's like white race of Russia. I would do this character. And one time I think I even did an Indian character for like a month. And he was just kind of like training me to, break up old calcified habits about my performing, me being way too physical and bits, whereas truly I was overcompensating for the lack of writing and the lack of comfortability I had just staying in the pocket. So he was one of them. In terms of acting and stuff like that, I would say the few people in my life who I'd really look to is my acting teacher, Ron Van Loo at NYU, who, I was never a great student. I went to NYU for grad school. I was never a great student. I was just kind of like late, and I was just trying to get laid, and I had bad diction. I had a terrible singing voice. I had a bad theater voice. But he just always liked me and just kind of thought that I was special, and that was enough for me to get through grad school. And the other thing was, there was a guy, my acting mentor, Jeff Weiss, who was he was just like an old East Village queen. And when I was in grad school having time, I would go do these plays with him called Hot Keys in the East Village, and he would write on an old typewriter. I mean, it wasn't that, it was like the late 90s. It wasn't like that crazy, but he would write in this old typewriter and smoke weed and ask me if I want to smoke. I was like, oh my God, this guy's smoking weed and he's writing a play. I couldn't believe it at the time. And then he would smoke weed before he performed. And I remember one time I was like, Jeff, you're smoking weed before you do the show? And he's like, hey, buddy, it's not Chekhov. Just climb up to the mountain and jump off. And he introduced this element of freedom, which was so antithetical to everything I learned in graduate school. It's just like, and it's probably part of the reason why I got into stand-up comedy, because from him, it was just like, at the end of the day, it's silly and it's fun and you're doing make-believe and you're pretending. Like, don't take yourself so seriously. Like, if you fuck up, big fucking deal. It's great. you're already in a state of humiliation as a performer. So don't worry if you fuck up. I mean, some of the best moments of SNL are moments where people are fucking up. That's what everyone thinks about.
Yeah.
Even movies like Guardians of the Galaxy, where Chris Pratt is given the infinity ball and he almost drops it, which is an actual fuck up that happened. It's one of the best moments in the movie. So he gave me the freedom to kind of let it go a little bit. Ron gave me the tools for acting. Jamie gave me the discipline for comedy. And then just in terms of everyone else, I just look at Tom McHale, who the director of, Hamilton, who directed me on Broadway for 9 months, a play called Lombardi. And just an ability, his ability to lead and to, galvanize a group of egocentric alpha male actors who were all vying, trying to get their balls on the plate. He was really incredible negotiating. I mean, it was like Chris Sullivan from This Is Us, Rob Riley from Dynasty, and me. We're all like these athletes, fucking dudes with the fucking, and he was able to kind of get us all working together and loving each other and dealing with a lot of egos. And I think that, and he, in the meantime, he never made his ego part of the journey. He kind of took a back seat. And so I looked to Tom McHale as someone who I think he's also probably the smartest person I've ever known. So that's easy for him to do that. But so I look at people who are able to be humble despite their success. I look at the people who work really hard, the people who are allowed to be fun and free. And those are the people in my life that I think have given me the most, joy in this business. Because at the end of the day, if it's not fun, why the fuck are we doing it?
I love it. Well, with that, I want to say thank you. I know you're very busy being a parent and getting all those things done, but we will put links to your website where we show this on YouTube and then, of course, our podcast. But thanks, Bill, for your time. I really appreciate you, man. This has been great.
We'll do it.
Absolutely. Thank you.